Now, President Xi Jinping's pledge for cooperation and financial commitment to development in Africa has been received well by African leaders, especially in light of the continent's growing debt burden. Now, earlier we spoke to the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Claver Gatete, and we wanted to find out his reaction to this news and, of course, expectations for this year's meeting.
We've been so lucky to participate in the FOCAC summit that was taking place. I think this pledge of 51 billion US dollars for 3 years is really a sign of goodwill, of cooperation, and also of continued cooperation between China and Africa, especially in terms of investments in critical areas of infrastructure, industries, and other infrastructure that are required for economic development. So it was really very positive to see all the heads of state together with China, again pledging to cooperate and moving forward in terms of transforming our economies.
Now, of course, this 2024 FOCAC summit comes at an interesting time, a time that African nations are also calling for reform to the global financial system. How exactly do you think we'll see a rebalancing of relations between China and Africa? And how do you think this will feature in those discussions at this year's summit?
Yeah, definitely it is. This summit is happening at a time when the whole African continent is feeling the pressure of really the high indebtedness, the low financing really that is coming to our continent, but also the high cost of climate change that is happening. So it's really happening at a time when there is a clear need for the reform of the current financial systems that were put in place a long time ago that are no longer fit for purpose. And something needs to be done. And that's why even at the United Nations headquarters, they are working on the Summit of the Future. There is a high debate for the reform of the financial architecture. This also very clear when there was a summit on the preparatory summit on financing for development, also talking about the same thing. Africa currently is paying really heavily in terms of their own debt servicing. They pay 163 billion US dollars per year in terms of debt servicing. Their debt level really now is beyond 1 trillion US dollars, which is quite high by any standard. And on average, it is 66% of debt to GDP ratio on the African continent. And this one leaves no room for any financing, and the concessional loans have also declined, as you all know. If you add this one to the impact of climate change, which is quite high, which costs Africa about 5% of their GDP, you can see that that mix is not a good one for any country that is trying to rebuild itself after the COVID-19.
Quite right. Well, on that note, Mr. Gatete, how then do you expect this year's meeting to sort of set the tone for China and Africa's growing relations for the next few years?
So what is happening and what is very clear is that the whole entire development of the African continent can no longer depend only on government investing. It also has to depend on private sector from both sides also investing in development. And they also need financing to make sure they can invest. And that's why it is very interesting for the China-Africa cooperation really discussions to take place at this time, because it's no longer China giving Africa money, but also we need investors from China who come with their money and invest on the African continent for the development, especially as you know, there is a vision, 2063, there's a 10-year program that has been put in place by the heads of state of the African Union. But at the same time, you have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we need to build infrastructure to connect each other, where we need to build industries. And this is where actually investment is needed more than ever. And that's why this kind of cooperation is so important, so that they can create a conducive environment for investment that is coming from here. But at the same time, of developing Africa as one market and taking advantage of also exports to China, of which you know that there has been some relaxation even in this meeting that's providing more opportunities for Africa to export here without paying duties.